Everyone. Let's begin by first allowing ourselves to find a comfortable seated position. Notice that you can relax your shoulders and even bring a little bit of length to the spine line. If you're comfortable doing so, placing your hands at heart center, inhaling. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturbharenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. And so we learned in our lecture previous week how to define asana and the benefits of yoga. We also looked at the pillars for yoga therapy, mostly recognizing that the application of the yogic principles depends on the very specific nature of the individual. We defined what vinyasa is, hatha, and then basic yoga. We also learned that basic yoga is really what we're going to be using when we help someone through the process of yoga therapy. Since the purpose of yoga is to balance the 5 VAYUs and bring Agni to a state of balance, we now need to take a look at different asanas for each of the VAYUs. Let's begin with Apana VAYU. You know from your studies that Apana VAYU resides in the pelvic cavity. It has a seat in the colon and the urinary tract, the vagina, the cervix, the testicles in men, and the prostate. Vitiated Apana VAYU symptoms include constipation, diarrhea, retention of urine, no menses or heavy menses, premature ejaculation, low libido, back pain, and sciatica. I think in my yoga therapy practice, one of the most prevalent reasons people come to me is because of the sciatic pain. So remind yourself when you start to treat people that the sciatic pain is really a vitiation of this lowest VAYU. Let's look at some asanas for Apana VAYU. We'll start with Malasana, which tones the abdominal organs and relieves backaches, eases menstrual discomfort. We'll also take a look at Baddha Konasana, which is good for the prostate and urinary disorders. Baddha Konasana helps regulate menstruation and helps ovaries to function normally. Pawanmuktasana, or the wind relieving pose, helps to expel air in the colon and aids constipation. It also helps to relieve tension in the low back. We'll look at each of these separately. Malasana, or the garland pose. While there are many variations of the garland pose, I want to remind you to always start with the most basic of poses. Here I'm showing the seated variation of Malasana. The main thing to remember here is to allow the hips, if you will, or the hip joint to relax. Oftentimes, Malasana, the standing version or the squatting version, can place excess strain on the low back and the hip joint. And so I start with this version and recommend it really over the standing variations, squatting variations of Malasana. As we move forward, please feel free, to get on the chat, to ask questions. Let's have an interactive class today. Remember that the benefits of Malasana include being good for the prostate and the bladder, the liver and the spleen. And when we're able to cleanse or balance these areas, we find that sluggishness ceases, and we also get a great benefit to the intestines. Any questions on Malasana? So someone's asking if, can I do this one if I had hip surgery? I think not only can you, but you should do this one with hip surgery. Was it for a hip replacement, I wonder? If it was for a hip replacement, I really would, partial hip replacement, yes, I would really recommend it. The biggest thing, remember, is that you're in a comfortable space, and this means that there isn't tension in your low back or your hip joint. Now, how soon after hip replacement can a person do this? Really, as soon as you're cleared from your doctor. This isn't something that I can necessarily say. Different people heal differently. If you're cleared from your doctor to resume normal activities, yoga therapy is part of normal activity. Remember, you're not going to be doing a yoga class. So a yoga therapy is definitely something that would be very therapeutic and help regain your range of motion. I have someone as a client right now who's had 2 hip replacements. Unfortunately, I'm seeing her 8 years after the hip replacement. I just keep telling her, I wish I would have seen you, directly after the hip replacement. And yes, this is definitely one asana, one pose I would have done for her. I actually do Malasana for her on the table, on the massage table. So I'm initiating the movement. She isn't. Of course, when she's on the table, it's more like happy baby, isn't it? Or dead bug. She's lying on her back, and I bring her leg up one at a time. We breathe there, consecutive breaths, move the prana, move the breath to the belly center, allow it to integrate into the hip joints by focusing even on the chakra colors, on the red and the orange of the low belly. And then we release, and then we go to the other leg and do the same sequence. And then thirdly, we go into the dead bug, happy baby, which is basically just Malasana. And then I initiate it again. I go over ahead and I bring one leg up and then the other, and we hold there. And we go through the sequence again of breathing through the low belly, moving the low belly, not breathing in the high chest, focusing on the different colors, releasing tension. We can stay in Malasana, I'll tell you, and the variations, the one leg, the happy baby, so forth, for 20 minutes at a time often. Definitely, I take her through this motion at the beginning of her treatment, at least for 10 minutes. So it isn't something that you're in and out of. It isn't something that you are quick with. So I hope that helps you, Danica. Very good question. I get lower back, my lower back getting more tense and painful. Yes, your low back will get tense and painful because all of the muscles, the external hip rotators, the erector spinae, all the glute muscles are getting excessively tight just because you're you're trying to heal, and sometimes we protect ourselves by tightening and holding. This is a great time for you to really begin to release not only the tension from the surgery, but tension from past karma, future karma, to start to release all of this. And we release all of this tension, including physiological tension, karma tension, by going into the pose and staying in it for long periods of time, visualizing, using the prana. This is what we do when we practice yoga therapy. So I love your question. It was very timely for our discussion today, our class today. But more importantly, I hope it helps guide you through a space of healing, not just physiologically, but emotionally, spiritually as well. And I believe you can get there if you go into Malasana with that sense of deep understanding, that sense of clarity within yourself, just by telling yourself, I feel myself moving into Malasana with a sense of deep clarity, a sense of understanding my physical body, a sense of caring for myself. This is some of the verbal cues I give my clients when they're on the table. And it's certainly the kind of verbal cues you should use for yourself when you're practicing Malasana for your hip replacement. The other thing is we want to remember that the brain acts in a very beautiful way, in that if we think of kicking a soccer ball, or we kick a soccer ball, actually kick the soccer ball, the same neurosynaptic pathways go off. In other words, I can just be thinking of playing soccer, and all the beautiful neurosynaptic pathways in my brain are firing, engaging. Now, if I go out later this afternoon and actually play soccer, the same neurosynaptic pathways are going to be opening, channeling, reinforcing as when I'm seated on my chair thinking about it. So of course, when I'm playing, I'm actually engaging the muscles and I'm getting the cardio system to engage as well. Of course, I would get added benefit from actually playing. But what I'm telling you this for and sharing this with you for is so that we can recognize that the brain is a powerful tool in yoga therapy. And just telling yourself, I feel healing entering into my hips. I feel a sense of deep relaxation in my hip area, my low back. That in itself will start the healing process. More importantly, that in itself will start to bring laxity or flexibility into your body and start the healing process in general. Is that fair? Okay. Please, everyone, I really do welcome your questions. And as you can see, we learn a great deal when people ask questions. I'm also really open if you have something that you would like to share from your own practice, privately, professionally, in whatever manner you'd like to share. I think this is a great forum for just meeting with like-minded people and sharing the beautiful knowledge of the sages together. So let's move on then. We saw the benefits. Now we're going to look at the Baddha Konasana. And I'm going to show you this version of Baddha Konasana, mostly because, again, remind yourself that most people are going to be in a great deal of pain and or weak, or may have just come out of surgery in the past weeks, you know. So we don't really want to give postures that are difficult to do or that require a great deal of strength or flexibility. We're trying to balance the VAYUs. We're not trying to, what should I say? I don't know, make them more, you know, imbalanced. We're not trying to irritate them, maybe is a good word. So This version I love very much for especially people maybe having trouble, of course, with their menses, maybe someone who's having trouble having babies. I had a client one time who is having trouble to get impregnated, to get pregnant, and garland and Baddha Konasana were one of the main poses that she had in her yoga therapy protocol. The benefits, of course, it stimulates abdominal organs, the ovaries, the prostate, bladder, and kidneys, stretches the inner thighs gently, the groin, in general, the hip joint, the knees, and it soothes menstrual discomfort. So this is a wonderful one, again, that we may want to do if you're having menstrual discomfort. Any questions on this one? Especially this variation. Well, again, consistency is key. So whether I'm teaching someone to meditate, to do pranayama or asana, consistency is key. And for that reason, I normally start with asking the client to do it for 1 minute a day. And everyone can do 1 minute a day, right? What I've learned is if I give client too long of a time, if I say do it 5 minutes a day, do it 10 minutes, they won't do it. But if I say, please, when you wake up in the morning, do Baddha Konasana. When you go to sleep at night, Baddha Konasana. Remember, it's always good to give the asana or whatever yoga therapy protocol you're giving, whether it's pranayama or anything else, even mantra or any of it. It's really important that you give them a cue, a Pavlovian cue, so to speak, so that every time they sit at their desk, every time they go to sleep, I've even asked people to do something while they're brushing their teeth. For instance, they could do tree pose with the leg very low, just to increase their balance when they're brushing their teeth, right? So you want to do something, number one, that's consistent. So I would start with something that's a minute. Also, oftentimes people have a very difficult time remaining in posture. Remaining in posture for long periods of time is one of the most difficult things, one of the most beneficial, but unfortunately one of the most difficult things to do. So if you're giving this to client, I would say start with 1 minute and then report back to me and tell me how you felt. Where was their discomfort? Because remember, if this therapy is going to be individualized, we want feedback from the client. We just don't want to say, go and do for 10 minutes and then never talk to them again. We want to talk to them throughout the week. Most of my clients I see weekly. And most of my clients I speak with via text 2-3 times during the week, especially new clients. I'll say, I want to know how you felt after you went into the pose. Give me feedback about it. And if they're having any extra discomfort, if it hurt, if they were fidgety, if the prana was disrupted, the breathing was erratic, well, then I want to give them a different pose, because I really want it to be a pose that eventually I can keep them in 10 minutes. Eventually at home, they can stay in it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So I hope that answers your question. The biggest thing is I'd rather have someone in posture for 1 minute every day of the week than 10 minutes 1 or 2 days of the week, because it's the consistency that's going to do the most benefit for people. So even if over the course of a year or over the course of 10 years, someone is only meditating or doing their asana yoga therapy for 1 minute a day, but they've done it every day for 10 years, that's going to play a bigger role in their healing process than someone that was erratic in their process. Is that okay? All right. What I found also is once people do 1 minute, I just leave them there for the 1 minute. If the pose is a good one, they're not having any extra discomfort, they can meditate. In other words, use mental cues to help themselves relax. Their prana is nice and regulated. Um, I usually don't tell them to do more time until they tell me, I love it so much, I'm doing 5 minutes. And I kind of just, I hope that's okay, they say. And I kind of just smile to myself because, of course, that's the idea. We want people to naturally come to do it themselves with more frequency. And they will if you find the right pose for them. Again, that was Baddha Konasana. And I chose that variation because 99% of people will be able to accomplish it. Pawanmuktasana, the air relieving pose. Here I'm holding around the front of the legs. I do want to caution you that if you hold in front of the legs, this can be discomforting to people with knee surgery or ailments. So they can still do the pose. They just have to hold underneath between the legs, right at the back of the thighs and in the back of the calves. But this pose, again, I love it very much because the spine line is directly long. There's no way that you can hurt the low back. There's no way that you can really hurt anything in Pawanmuktasana. Of course, we talked about not holding around the legs if people have problems with their knees or knee surgery. The benefits is relieves excess gas. Again, this is balancing Apana VAYU or Prana VAYU, but it also helps to remove irregularity in the digestive system. This yoga pose will tone and stretch your low back. One of the best poses, again, if you're having low back pain. So you might want to start, for instance, if we wanted to think of just this sequence of poses that we've done today. We might want to start with the garland, or we might want to do this in the morning because it is a little more active. Baddha Konasana, at least this version, would be a lovely pose to do in the evening. And Pawanmuktasana would be a lovely pose to do in the evening or the midday. Again, someone with the digestive disorders, I would do this in the midday. Someone who's having back pain, I would do it at night. And the reasons, of course, should be obvious just based on the times of day for Vata, Pitta, Kapha. How do we balance Samana VAYU? We know that Samana VAYU provides stimulus for digestion, absorption, and assimilation of food. When it's vitiated, Samana VAYU symptoms include loss of appetite, bloating, gas, and malabsorption. Asanas for Samana VAYU include Navasana, all twists, and Vashisthasana. Now, when I say all twists, I want to add a little caveat here. Twists can be some of the more dangerous poses to give a client, mostly because they'll either go too far or they won't have proper breathing in the twist, going in and out of twist. We should always exhale when we enter or come out of a twist. And the reason for that is we want to support the spine line. When we exhale, the belly should naturally go towards the spine line, and that, of course, will support the spine. So that's the way to go into the pose. Secondarily, the twists, for someone with problems in their back, even though twists are very good for someone with back injury, it isn't necessarily a pose that I would give for someone to do on their own, because once again, they usually don't do it correctly with correct positioning of the spine or correct breathing. Now, if you're working with someone in your office, of course, you would be able to cue them as to the proper breathing, and you'd be able to have their spine line straight when they're doing the twist. So just a caveat in the twist there, please. Navasana. I like doing the bent knee version of Navasana, mostly because most people can keep their spine line straight. You notice the low back is not rounded. You notice the chest is alive and forward. You shouldn't have a concave in Navasana. And if that means that the knees are halfway up, then that's the way that we should do it. You can actually do Navasana with one leg down, one foot touching the ground. For those people that have problem even bringing 2 feet up, it's a very beneficial pose. So I would suggest whatever way people need to do Navasana, in other words, either with bent knees or with 1 foot touching the ground, I really would recommend it. Of course, we know again the benefits, and it's one of my favorites to give for Pitta vitiation. Paripurna Navasana, the full variation. Of course, we always want to maintain the straight back. You see the low back is not curved or bulging outward, and that's the main thing there. Let's take a look at the chat. What if someone has pain in the tailbone? They're doing the pose incorrectly. You do not sit on the tailbone. When I teach yoga classes, that's one of the main things people do incorrectly, is they rock themselves backward and sit on the sacrum and then hurt the tailbone. You don't sit on the sacrum. That has nothing to do with the tailbone or the sacrum. It has to do with sitting on the sit bones. So the first thing you should do if you're having pain in the tailbone is rock yourself forward and bend your knees a lot. And if you can't maintain it in that position, hold yourself underneath your knees in what I call the half boat, Ardha Navasana, that half boat posture with the knees bent. Just hold underneath your knees. But you notice I'm not rocked backward. You don't get on your sacrum. Touch your sacrum, touch the tailbone. And the moment you feel yourself going back on the tailbone and sacrum, that's the moment you know you're doing it incorrectly. And the first cue, of course, is pain. Rock forward, get on the front part of your tush. Thank you for your questions. Okay, weak back or belly, although it's a contraindication, for doing the pose, I really think it would benefit. We need to do it, but do it correctly. Here's a pose, of course, a twisting pose. I chose this one because this twist requires strength in the back as well as strength in the belly. Most people can't keep the low belly and back straight. You'll find a big curve when they're doing this pose. Well, all you have to do is hold around the legs instead of bringing both hands in prayer. Is that fair? Okay. Of course, the benefits of the twist include invigorating, cleansing the liver and the spleen, helps us sluggishness, benefits the intestines, size of the abdomen decreases. And the biggest thing there is because it really does engage a lot of the muscles, the internal and external obliques, and also the erector spinae. Very, very good pose. But of course, then another variation would be a reclining twist. Most people can do a reclining twist safely. However, you notice the line of my spine again. It's straight. Look at the side of my body, straight. We don't want the legs to either be lower than the hip. You see how my legs are the same line as the hip joint? Most people do this incorrectly by dropping the knees too low. You want the knee in the same line as the hip, and you want the spine line long. One of the best poses for low back pain, but we must be very careful, as I mentioned, entering and exiting the pose. And also in the twists, really important to keep the spine line long, and if you're doing a reclining twist, to keep the knees in line with the hip line. Any questions? Here's another one. Again, this could be a basic pose for some people. This was, I think, maybe I took this 5 years ago. I probably can't do this pose anymore. I haven't tried it in a while, but I do this one quite a bit, and the seated variation quite a bit. But again, if you have someone who is strong, flexible, have a regular practice, maybe the best pose might be the Parsva Bakasana. Vashisthasana, known as the best or excellent pose. In this pose, I want to remind you that most people can do this pose, even those with wrist injuries. All we would have to do, of course, is to bend the elbow and come onto the elbow and forearm. The main thing is to keep the wrist and or the elbow directly under the shoulder line. It strengthens the lumbar, the coccyx region of the spine, builds awareness of the belly and the spine connection. Visvamistrasana, variation again with the leg up. The main thing is the spine isn't saggy, and if you'll notice, still the hand is directly underneath the shoulder line. Neither angled forward or angled up. It has to be right under the spine line or you're going to hurt the shoulder. Of course, the recent injury, wrist injury, would be a contraindication. Any feedback? So these are all poses we're talking there for Samana VAYU. Let's move into Vyana VAYU. We know that it maintains cardiac circulation, nutrition, and oxygenation of cellular tissues in the heart system. When vitiated, Vyana VAYU symptoms include ischemia or lack of oxygen to the heart or other organs of the body, and swelling of the lower extremities. Asanas for Vyana VAYU include Paschima Namasakrasana, Garudasana, and Matsyasana. So here we have a pose. Sometimes people are not able to accomplish because of wrist inflexibility. Of course, the variation would be holding on to the elbows, but you still get all the benefits. Well, I won't say all the benefits, but many of the benefits that are going to be helpful for Vyana VAYU. Of course, the main thing we want to do is we want to open the chest center and we want to retract the front of the chest, retract the shoulder blades, bringing the shoulder blades together. And this can be accomplished even when we hold our elbows, or for those that are somewhat tighter, placing the hands in a fist behind the back, knuckles together. So even if someone can't do the full variation, there are definitely variations that people can accomplish with ease. Of course, the benefits: stretches the wrists, forearms, and shoulders, relieves carpal tunnel syndrome, opens the heart chakra. Matsyasana, the fish. Here I'm taking a variation of it. It's not the full fish pose or the traditional fish for that matter. I take this one again because most people would be able to do this pose. Again, the knees are bent. The knees are in direct alignment with the hip. The belly is supported with the strength of the back. The arms are in direct alignment with the shoulder line, and then the chest is forward. Of course, it expands the chest, provides a pathway for deep breathing. Garudasana, the eagle pose. Here we have the top arm, which is the one that's getting the deepest stretch, in line with the shoulder. If you look at the line of the elbow, it's directly straight across horizontally with the shoulder. Most people have a difficult time bringing that high arm in line with the shoulder, but that's where the shoulder joint will be the most safe. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're giving the yoga therapy to the clients, that you demonstrate it correctly with the high arm in the same line as the shoulder line. Secondarily, if a client is unable to do the full variation, and the full variation would include finger to finger, in other words, thumb to thumb, pointer to pointer, etc. If they can't accomplish the full variation, many of you know you can just hug your own shoulder line. Still, the arms are in Garudasana. They're as high as the shoulder line, and all you do is bring your arms around to hug your own shoulders. Benefits of stretching the upper back, provides relief for tight shoulders and neck, bring awareness to heart and throat chakra from a subtle point of view. I think this is a good point that Garudasana can really help us with Udana VAYU as well, especially if we take variations of Garudasana, maybe in a, for instance, a warrior position, or even in a classic variation with the legs engaged in Garudasana style, or even in Tadasana, if we look upward and open the neck area. Really a lovely pose for two areas of the body that are frequently out of balance, the neck area and the heart area, okay? We move on to Udana VAYU, and I'm going to pause just very briefly. Any questions? Okay. We know that Udana VAYU is responsible for speech and exhalation. It also stimulates our memory, and if balanced, aids in easing confusion and depression. Vitiated Udana VAYU symptoms include quiet or hoarse voice, a lack of memory, lack of creativity, and a lack of drive. Asanas for Udana VAYU include Ujravasta, Tarasana, Sasangasana, and Balasana. So just reaching the hands upward in Tadasana, you notice that the head is upward and gazing upward. Now, even a more gentle pose we could think of, we talked about it a little bit a moment ago, we talked about Garudasana, but the main quality is that we're looking upward. So we could even sit in a chair, people who have vitiated Udana VAYU, who work at an office desk, just allowing the back to come to the back of the chair so the spine line is long, and gently looking upward would be a wonderful pose, wouldn't it? and something that everyone could do. Sasasana, or the rabbit pose, bringing the head directly inward or bowing the chin in towards the chest. Again, a very simple variation would be seated at a desk in a chair and bringing the chin to a chest without rounding the shoulders. In this pose, we really want to bring the chin down, and you'll feel a gentle stretch in the back of the neck. We don't want to collapse the spine, so that's the reason I say don't bring the shoulders forward if you're doing the seated variation. Balasana, the child's pose, of course, contraindications would include someone with knee problems. Oftentimes, Balasana isn't approachable for people with knee injuries. So, of course, we'd have to give props, and maybe not even props for someone with a recent knee surgery or very, very tight low back or tibialis in the front of the legs, quads. Some people can't do Balasana. So as mild and wonderful as Balasana seems to be, it isn't approachable for all people. So we may want to, in order to balance Udana VAYU, we may want to retreat to seated postures. Again, just looking upward or tucking the chin into the chest without rounding the shoulders in a seated position. Any questions? Moving forward to Prana VAYU. Prana is movement of mind, thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensation, and perception. According to Vasant Lad, thought is a vibration of prana. Vitiated prana symptoms include I always mix this word up, dyspnea. I should probably just put shortness of breath, palpitation, anxiety, nervousness, fear, inability to focus. Diseases include sleep apnea, stroke, grand and petit mal epilepsy, and headaches. Vitiated prana is a tough one. Prana moves everywhere, doesn't it? Dvipada viparita karini calms the brain. Meditation and pranayama, I'm going to say, are number one. And then all poses done with awareness and proper breathing. It's almost like any pose that you give someone, that it's done with awareness and proper breathing. Shavasana, just lying on the back, are going to be wonderful and great poses for vitiated prana. But let's start with two legs up the wall. One of my favorite poses, not only for vitiated prana, but for all imbalances of the VAYUs, and I'll even say all imbalances of the chakras in general. Now, I know prana and chakras are two different things, but those of you who have a very adept practice or yoga practice are well aware of the chakras. We're not going to go into them right today, but in general, people with imbalanced chakras, one of the best postures. One of the best postures for the mind. Those are having problem either with anxiety, stress, trouble sleeping, one of the best postures. If I were to say, I would say two legs up the wall could be a pose that you could give almost for any ailment, and it would help it. Truly my favorite pose, a go-to for many, many people with high blood pressure, trouble sleeping, I've said already, just wonderful, wonderful go-to pose. Padmasana, the lotus pose, not very approachable for many people, but those people that can approach Padmasana with ease. The biggest thing is that the mind is comfortable. If people are having trouble because the ankles, the knees, the back are hurting, then of course it's not a pose to be given. Now, please, I'd like to open up for some questions. You might hear Tara in the background. That's my dog Tara. She's growling. It's believed that when a dog is vocal, that there's truth and running through the things that are being said. So we'll just take that as a good signal that what we're moving through here is in truth and is in good energy, since Tara was so wonderful to give us her vocalization. Any questions, please? Can we then, maybe I'll ask, are there any of these poses that you feel comfortable using for yourself or using for a client straight away? Is there something that maybe you weren't aware of either one of the poses? Please, any feedback?
So Devi, Pamela has a question. She missed the beginning. She missed the second slide.
Okay, let's go look at the beginning. Hello, Pamela. Namaste. Glad you joined. Let's look. I'll just go through the first two slides real quickly. We learned the lecture 2. We know what the purpose is. Now, were you worried about the Apana VAYU? We know where it resides, and when it's vitiated, the kinds of problems it creates.
Yes, that's the one. The Apana VAYU is what you wanted to look at.
Okay, well, let's go look at it. So poses for this would include, I'll stay here just on this slide just for a moment, and then move forward to the asanas. Used will be Malasana, Baddha Konasana, and Pavamuktasana, the wind relieving pose. The main thing as we started moving forward in any of the asanas is that you recognize that even though there are deeper variations or more difficult variations, that you really want to keep the variations simple. And that's why I gave this version. I didn't give the standing version. The other thing is, in the Baddha Konasana, most people have difficulty keeping the spine line long. If the spine line isn't in a supported position, how does prana flow? And in my view, then, how does prana help heal? How does apana move? How does any of it work?
So Devi, there's another question from Danica. She's had surgery, so part of her esophagus was removed. So she cannot sit straight on the floor. She cannot lie like that. So what she's asking what her option is.
Okay, very good things. In the first pose, which one are we talking about? The garland?
Yeah, she's talking about the garland.
Okay. So the main thing then, if you're having difficulty with that, I would suggest that you would lie down, to be honest, and allow your legs. I wouldn't do then the garland. I don't think the garland is right for you then, to be honest. Why don't we do then Baddha Konasana? Let's start there. And then slowly move away from the wall, but keep the spine line long. And then place your legs up on the wall with the feet, even with the knees, until you're able to ease some stretching into the hips, the low back, the abdominal area.
Another question from Pamela. For Malasana variation, can we use a block if person cannot reach their arms or forearms down because of a stiffness?
Well, you know what? I'm going to say a yes, no, maybe so to that one. What I find is when people are excessively tight for yoga therapy, I'm not talking about a yoga class. For yoga therapy, if they're excessive tight, I don't really like using the block. I either have like to support them by having them lie down or by doing the pose for them myself. Does that make sense? And the reason for that is I find if they're really uncomfortable that the block, um, it kind of locks the VAYUs, it blocks the VAYUs. In other words, the positioning probably isn't right. Are they stretching things? Yes. So it would be good for a yoga class, but it's not really good for the therapy of a class or of an individual. In other words, I want their spine line to be mostly supported. I want them to be comfortable. So again, maybe that's just not the best pose for them. Maybe a better pose would be just to get on their back and put the legs up the wall to a position that they can bring their knees into the chest. And I would suggest if they're too tight to do the garland pose, then it's really all of the muscles of the low back and the tush, and bringing their legs up the wall with bent knees will do equally as good as if they're seated. I'm just worried that even with the block that they're going to hurt the spine. They're going to go too far forward and end up creating injury instead of helping themselves out. So in my practice, I don't use it too much, the block for yoga therapy. I use the wall, I use the floor for support, and then I physically help adjust them. What kind of mistakes people can make in asanas for Apana VAYU? Well, the main thing again, it's not breathing properly, not using their intention. You have to use the intention and the breath. It's just not magically going to happen. The mind and the breath are viable and beautiful options for the asana practice. They actually make the asana practice effective. Um, so is that fair? The biggest mistake I'm going to say is mistakes with the breath and mistake with the spine line being out of position. So for that reason, giving things that are on the floor and using the wall for adjustment. Okay. I hope that started to help you recognize how we can use asana, but more importantly, how we can use awareness of the physical body to link it, so to speak, link the physical body with the VAYUs, link the physical body with the mind. It isn't just one thing, oh, I'm going to do a physical pose and it's going to help me. All three have to be involved. The mind, the body, and the spirit have to be involved for yoga therapy to be effective. And in my view, all three have to be involved for it to be considered yoga therapy. There's no yoga therapy if there's no mind work going on. There's no yoga therapy if there's no breath work going on.
I just want to address one thing, Sudevi. Pamela is asking that you had said no props for therapy. I just want to say that that's not what Sudevi meant. She doesn't say absolutely no props. I think, is that right, Sudevi? It's only as and when needed. Yeah.
The main thing is you have to know your client. Props are very viable, but most people don't have a wealth of props. And so they'll use a pillow from here, or they'll get a rope from there, or this, that, and the other. Now, if they're adept Iyengar practitioners and they know how to use the blankets and the bolsters, the straps, and you see them in their office and you're able to get them into the pose with complete support, go for it. I'm happy with it. But that usually takes a lot more from a teacher, meaning you have to be Iyengar certified, at least knowledgeable of Iyengar, and many people aren't. They use the props incorrectly. So what I'm trying to give you is I'm trying to give you ways to help people where they take the asana home and they do it themselves. Everyone has a floor, everyone has a wall, and they can keep the spine line in a good space. Should they use a block? Ooh, that's why I said kind of the yes, no, maybe so. Depends who the practitioner is. Depends who the teacher is. Is it an adept Iyengar teacher? Well, definitely yes. If it's a teacher that knows nothing of Iyengar, a block is of no use. A block is a crutch, or a block is a tool that makes you think you're doing it correctly when you're not. What I say is know the anatomy first, know what the contraindications are second, and then use things that are easy for the practitioner and the teacher. And that means the floor and the wall. Thank you for the clarification. With that, I'll really thank you for your wonderful attention. And I look forward to next week when we look at the asanas for Agni. And I'll see you on the forum.